Greetings from the Motorcycle Tech and Travel channel. I'd like to share our time capsule Honda XR400R motorcycle. It's been in storage for the last 9 years and had such few miles on it when we got it that the tires still show the original manufacturer's striping on them. We're about to put the bike back in service, and in this case, it's virtually new to start with. Here's a comparison with our XR350R. My venerable, time-honored XR motorcycle from 1984. The XR400R is 20 years newer. You can see a striking resemblance between the XR400R styling and the CRF450. This pristine motorcycle was purchased in 2014 with less than 12 actual hours of runtime. By contrast, the XR350R is a traditional enduro motorcycle from the 80s. Both bikes feature Pro-Link suspension, so they're a good comparison. We'll compare the bikes off-road. So let's get started on getting this XR400R running. When we put this bike in storage, I had the good sense to drain the carburetor. That's a first and foremost thing to do on any motorcycle placed in storage for any length of time. The fuel tank and whatever remnant of fuel it had in it were protected with Sta-Bil. So our first order of business is to look at the fuel tank from the inside, if necessary with the bore scope, looking for debris or damage to the petcock filter in the tank. The carburetor may need a rebuild, but that's still in question. If draining the gasoline was sufficient, we may not have to rebuild the carburetor, and that would save a great deal of time. So let's begin by removing the gas cap, and we'll take a closer look inside the tank. We're concerned about varnish from any remaining fuel. So let's begin by removing the fuel hose from the petcock and see whether we have an issue with remaining fuel in the tank. We'll start there. So I've hooked up an auxiliary hose in place of the original equipment fuel line into the drain pan. And we'll open the petcock and see what's going on here. This is a carbureted engine, so all of this is a lot easier. So now that's on. We'll turn it to reserve in a second. Make sure there's no chance of any fuel stuck in the system. I'm going to blow some compressed air into the tank and see if we can get anything at all to come out. There's nothing coming out of the tank. You can smell fumes, and that's the extent of it. So this is our bore scope. And what can you do with the bore scope? You can look inside the tank, and what you get to see is, in this case, I have it centered right over the fuel screen at the petcock. And I'm looking to see if that's deteriorated from bad fuel. The filter screen is detached from the petcock and laying flat in the bottom of the tank. The end of this probe is wet with fuel. We're not getting any fuel from the hose. We haven't drained any fuel from the tank yet. We know there's fuel in the tank. We're going to carefully remove the petcock from the tank. Well, this says it all. This is what's dripping out of the tank. It's a black tar-like substance, actually gasoline. In the pan we have black fluid, which was at one time gasoline. The tank needs to come off and be flushed thoroughly. No fuel stabilizer can be expected to work for the length of time this bike was in storage. The petcock is full of this tar-like substance as well. Fortunately, the petcock was off the entire time the bike was in storage, and none of this tar-like substance made its way into the carburetor. While the carburetor drain plug looks somewhat contaminated, the good news is that there is no residue around the jets. And this could mean that the carburetor itself is not contaminated. It was drained, and that's important. Anytime a bike goes into storage, the carburetor should be drained thoroughly. So let's remove the 2 bolts that hold the back end of the seat on. Lift the seat off position. Slide it rearward. Looks like there's a need for a new strap for the fuel tank. Remove the 2 bolts, one on each side, and the tank lifts right off. pour the remainder of the fuel out of the tank. The fuel tank's nylon insert sleeve at the filler needs to be removed in order to get all of this gasoline out of the tank. Dispose of this flammable fluid properly. After research, we selected Berryman B12 Chem Tool to clean the residue out of the tank. It is harmless to plastics. Yes, that's the remnant of the filter screen from the petcock. The petcock screen, riser tube for the reserve tank, and the petcock itself are ruined. Here I inspect carefully, looking for remnants of the tar-like substance. Fortunately, the carburetor float bowl is not gummed up and cleans up very readily with Berryman B12. Removing the carburetor is difficult, so the float gets checked while mounted on the engine in the frame. This is a rough measurement and is intended more to see that the needle is not sticking in the seat and that the float goes up and down well. To remove the float bowl with the carburetor still mounted on the engine required constructing this special tool. The Berryman B12 cleaner cleaned up the plug. These are the new parts from Honda. We've got a new petcock with strainer, the O-ring, and the gas tank strap. Genuine Honda parts may be costly, but assure quality and a bike that's reliable 100 miles from nowhere. There are aftermarket petcocks available. Some of them are very inexpensive, and I wouldn't consider using any of them. This is a genuine Honda part with a new Honda O-ring, and we're about to fix this properly. We're always following the 100 miles from nowhere rule. This needs to be installed properly and not fail in the field. With the hardware secured and the petcock in the off position, we'll go ahead and fill the tank before we attach the fuel line and make sure that the petcock is not leaking and that we have a good seal at the O-ring. So I've upgraded the fuel line to 50 psi EFI hose with stiff spring clamps that are much better than the OEM. I use a fuel hose cutter to make sure that we have a square end on this hose. This is a much better quality hose and clamp than the OEM. This quality Gates hose is braided and can handle up to 50 psi pressure. Notice the flow of the hose. It's not near anything that it can rub against, and it has a nice even bend that doesn't stress the hose or make it difficult for the hose to stay in position. This hose is an upgrade from the OEM. With the hose secured properly, no chance of chafing against anything, we're going to go ahead and turn the fuel on and let it flow into the carburetor. It's time to take these two bikes out for an initial test run. The carburetor is overflowing from a needle that's not seating when the float rises. This could be a sticky needle. This is not a good start to a first run. Turn off the petcock. Gentle tapping on the float bowl with a screwdriver handle is usually a good way to unseat a stuck needle or possibly get an unseated needle to seat. Turn it on partially instead of all the way open. Actually, just go run it with it closed. Okay. And let's let the float drop. Okay. Run it until it starts. With it off. Yeah. Off. The fast clip idle is a hint that the carburetor float level is high or there's too much fuel in the float bowl. Is the petcock on or off? Yeah, good. See what happens here. That's right. It's not leaking now. Clear it out. Got it. stop leaking too.
Yeah, for now.
Yeah. We know what it is.
I don't want to go up that dirt road there and back. You want to go?
Go ahead.
You don't want to go?
No.
Okay.
How far up are you going to go? Clear it out first with the compression release.
Oh.
Clear it.
Turn the...
Don't use a choke at all. Clear it a couple kicks. Nice and gentle. Just like that.
Go.
Go.